All right, so there's nothing like walking into your local Kroger's, into a place that you've been going into since you were in kindergarten, and seeing the same people for a long time that work there. You walk up to one of your favorite cashiers, and instead of greeting you with a normal smile, she looks at you and she's crying. Not because she's emotionally hurt, but because she's tired of her life and no one cares about her, and this job is making her miserable because she can't pay her rent with the money she makes. Now you're talking a person that's working full time in retail. Their parents are all gone. They're 25 years old, and they look at their life as being a smoking crater. And this isn't an accident. This is across America the way that people are reacting to regular life. In fact, I was walking through the store and one of the really old lady cashiers, I'd say she's in her late 60s easily. I asked her why she didn't get the day off, and she said at Kroger's, we don't get holidays off, which is true. Most retail places want to be open when people have time off so people can come spend their money. But she did say this, even though she was working on Veterans Day, lots of customers thanked her for working today. I know that it's a small gesture, but when you work in retail, you do feel invisible. I've been there for years at a time. I've worked in the store right down the street, and I know what it feels like to have to work on Thanksgiving and knowing full well that no one really cares about you. All right, so let's get into our opening monologue. You ever notice how walking into a grocery store feels like entering a battlefield you didn't sign up for? Prices jump like they're trying to escape. Your paycheck shrinks like it's ashamed of you. And the cashier looks like they've aged three presidential terms in one shift. Meanwhile, corporate is on TV smiling like we're a family, which is hilarious because in my family we don't charge 7.49 for strawberries. Welcome to the American grocery store, the place where capitalism finally stops pretending. This is so true. I was walking through the store today and I'm like, the new normal is $10. I looked at a jar of olives and it was $10.99, and I'm like, are you kidding me? And then I looked over at the bell peppers and the jalapenos, and they were so expensive that they were offering buy one get one free. So what does that mean? You're paying what it should actually cost, but you have to buy two of them. So, yeah, it's kind of frightening walking into the grocery store, and we don't have an alternative. There aren't many places, especially around here. It's either Kroger's or Walmart, and Walmart's just too depressing for me to go into anymore. Not only are the workers dead inside, but the customers. Look at the people shopping inside. They're not filling up carts. People are coming in to get what they need to eat for the day. Oh my gosh. It says that we're supposed to get an inch of rain this weekend. That's never good. Usually means flooding. Anyhow, with that said, let's get into today's talking points. Today I asked ChatGPT to make my talking points more statistic based because I feel like it's creating emotionally based talking points over and over again, and I can't keep reading the same thing that life is a subscription service. That's actually what the first comment that it generated today was, based on my opening two sentences. No one cares about me, and I can't stand being at this job anymore. Exactly what the cashier said to me. That's what created this script. All right, so let's get into this. Rent has outpaced wages in 90% of the US. So when people say they feel like they're drowning, it's not depression, it's arithmetic. I know for a fact that this cashier makes $16 an hour. Her rent, far away. Remember that she has to take a Waymo to get to work every single day because she had to move to Mesa. And now her paycheck is nearly her rent is nearly an entire paycheck. She's always paying her rent late. It usually takes her an extra 2 weeks every month of paying late fees because she's falling further and further behind. And on top of that, who does she ask for help? Like, I didn't know how to console her today because she was just bright red and crying. In fact, at one point, she was scanning the barcodes on my items and she's just stopped. She told the person that was in line behind me not to come into the lane. But of course, remember, cashiers are invisible people. Cashiers are just the self checkout machine. We treat people like this as NPCs. They make noises, but we don't pay attention. That's just about every single profession in America. When the workers make noises that they're hurting, that they're suffering, that they're not getting paid enough money, no one listens because it's mindless chatter. The corporation doesn't care if you can't feed yourself. The corporation doesn't care if you haven't eaten this week. The corporation doesn't care if you're crying at work. It would prefer that you would cry in your car in the parking lot or cry in the shower, but preferably don't cry on the clock. On the clock, turn those frowns upside down and shed those tears because you need to be smiling while you're taking it in the rear. Even as a cashier, Felice shows up because Felice has to take a piece out of everyone. And he especially loves people wearing name tags and uniforms. So it's like I said yesterday, the low motivation society that we live in is was manufactured that way. Your quality of life will diminish to the point where most of us will reject life. I know that I woke up this morning and I was sitting in this chair thinking of what I should do next because I honestly didn't know. Today, I went to the Five and Below store, which reminded me a lot of Pick and Save. For those of you who are out there and don't know what a Pick and Save is, consider yourselves to be a spring chicken. But I'd never been in a Five and Below store before, and I walked around and I had a lot of nostalgia for it. They had the usual off-brand toys and garbage that probably doesn't work. But as I walked through the aisles, I did find one thing that I wanted, and it wasn't the off-brand Legos. It was Legos themselves. And it was a Lego like I hadn't seen before, right? They have lots of different kinds of Legos, but this one was a Lego that built a camera. And if most of you don't know, I consider myself to be a photographer of some sort. I mean, I have more cameras than any person that I know. I think I own like 6 different cameras. But I saw this and just the sheer remembering as a child that my parents would never buy me any of the expensive GI Joe toys or He-Man toys. None of those toys my parents would ever buy me. It was what I got to play with at other kids' houses, the latest Transformers, and I probably did get off-brand Legos when I was a kid. I don't even remember, but I saw this box, bright yellow, classic Lego box, and I had to buy it. Why? Because the child version of me remembers looking at that box and knowing full well that I would never get a real toy until I could afford to buy it for myself. And it's really strange because when you're a kid, all you want is sugar and toys. But the second you grow up, you no longer have that. Sugar and toys gets replaced by rent, car payments, student loans, credit cards. It's like you lose every part of your person that used to be fun and it's replaced with a mindless, repetitive job and a life that's not worth living. And I think that's what I really took away from looking at that cashier. That was just me. When she said, no one understands that nobody cares about me, I told her it's like you're looking at someone who has nothing. Literally nothing. I spend nearly all of my time, I would say 99.9% of my time, completely alone. On days in which I don't go to work, I typically don't talk to anyone. I just sit here and I kill time by distraction. And that is really, really hard to do, especially at night when there's nothing else to think about. When you're laying there in bed and it's you and thinking about how it can get worse, that's what we think about as the proletariat. We're not fantasizing about uh, exotic getaways or beautiful women. That's not for us anymore. For the average prole man, your chances of dating anymore are highly unlikely because the standards have, just like the standard and the quality of life, women don't want Johnny six pack who's working a crap job or is working two crap jobs, or a guy that's never home because he's always at a crap job, probably flirting with the other women that are there. That's what men do. But that's a story for another day. Let's get into talking point number two. The average full time worker now needs two jobs to match the purchasing power that they once had. That is incredibly true. The average full time worker is making around 16 bucks an hour. And I don't care what government statistics say, because those same statistics say that we have a 4% unemployment rate. That's BS, and you and I both know it. So when they use those government stats to say that the average pay is like $70,000 a year in America, I call BS on that, because I don't know where those jobs exist, but they're not at Kroger's, they're not at Jack in the Box, they're not at McDonald's or Burger King or Walmart. That's not real. And for the government to continually tell us that this is the way that our country is prospering, it is not. There's so many people that have been, the vast majority of people have already been left behind. People in call centers, people working at warehouses, people digging ditches. This is reality. The average income, I would say, in America is about $20,000, maybe even less. I'm a person who made between $13,000 and $19,000 a year almost my entire adult life. I was always working at either minimum wage or a dollar above the minimum wage. So that equates to about that much for every single time that the minimum wage has gone up. And remarkably, the minimum wage is usually 100 times the monthly rent. So if you're making so if you're making $16 an hour, your rent is going to be about 100 hours of that. And you do the math. How many hours is there in a month? There's 160 work hours in a month, and the average rent is what you make in 100 hours. That leaves you 60 hours to figure out everything else. And that's the average. Because at least here in where I live in Tempe, average rent is $2,300 a month. But the minimum wage is $14.75. That doesn't add up. You can't afford to live on what you make. Even studio apartments have gotten ridiculous. And a studio apartment, I live in an apartment complex where there are areas, just like every apartment complex, there are, nicer apartments, and then there's the bare bone apartments. And every time I walk past the bare bone apartments with nothing in them, one room and a toilet, kind of like what my old apartment looked like, a cell straight out of prison, right? Where you got a bunk, a metal toilet, and a metal shower. That's what those places look like. And every once in a while, I'll walk past and there are two people living there with dogs or cats or both. And you wonder, how in the hell are you cohabiting with animals and another person in a space where there's no way that you don't see each other every moment of the day? There's no way you can take a dump without the other person knowing that you're taking a dump and listening to you. Like there was a girl that used to live underneath me for about a year. I didn't know this, but she had a man staying with her that looked like they didn't look like they would be together. Let's just put it that way. And it turns out she was renting half of her bed to him. Like they weren't in a relationship. She was so poor, she was renting out the other half of her bed to a stranger, or let's just a coworker. They both worked at this insurance place together, an insurance call center. And for the longest time, I didn't know that. I would just see him out standing outside, just kind of like looking up into the sky every once in a while. And I'd be like, why is that guy outside? And now I know why. Because there was no point There's no way that he can hide from the other person. It's like sitting in this room where I'm at right now, and the other person is constantly in the room with you. That would be so uncomfortable. And think about that. We live in a society where you can now rent out the other half of your bed to some stranger or a coworker that needs a place to stay. It turns out that she was at the dog park. Yeah, and there was a dog. She's at the dog park about, I'm going to say, about a year after moving in when she met her significant other. And yes, she was really, really, really attractive. And she met her. And so they ended up both moving in together into a larger apartment. And I haven't seen her since then. I forget what her name was. I think it was like Grace or Amy or something like that. I think it was Amy. Anyhow, true story happened, and but it goes to show where we're at with the rent in today's society. All right, talking point number 3. 1 in 8 Americans lives in poverty, even though most of them are employed. But we're told the system works, just not for people inside it. And that's the frightening thing. Functional unemployment is very real in America. And I talk about this all the time. But functional employment is when you're working, but what you make isn't enough to pay your bills. So you may be working, but you're not making enough money to cover what you need in order to be able to survive. And I'm not talking about anything essential. I have more ramen noodles that I bought today, along with a couple of sauces that I'm going to try and put on them to kill the monotony of eating ramen every single day. Because I tried to eat that spam this morning, and even I, a person who eats ramen every day, could not stomach spam. And it's one of those foods that more Americans are turning to because of the cost of meat has skyrocketed. Meat for a lot of Americans is now a luxury item. Can you imagine that? Today, ground beef has become a luxury item. Chicken is anywhere from $7 to $8 a pound, and you kind of look at yourself and you think, if I'm thinking this, right? Is the person right behind me who's also looking at the same overpriced meat thinking the same thing? Or have they normalized this? You know what other thing I noticed too? We're only 14, we're about 3 weeks away right now from Thanksgiving. And the Kroger's by my house isn't putting out the turkeys. I'm willing to bet that they're too afraid to put the turkeys out because people are going to steal them. Again, this is just speculation on my part, but I think this year they're going to put the turkeys behind security glass because that's what I would do if I was the owner of that store and I knew how hard up people were right now. I would put every turkey behind the security glass and make certain that you could only get one after you paid for it because that's where we're at right now. If that's not the measure of a struggling society where Thanksgiving dinner has to be put behind security glass, I don't know what else is. It's frightening to look where every year prior to this, the turkeys were just out. Now they're not. They have sliced hams, and not even the whole ham anymore. They're quarter-sized hams that they now have out in the deli section. But the turkeys, not so much. And maybe I didn't look hard enough because it's not obviously a product that I would buy. I never have ever cooked a turkey in my entire life. And I find turkey deli meat to be too dry and I don't like it. I'll buy it if it's on sale, but as in going out of my way to buy a turkey sandwich, not a chance. I don't like it. But as you well know, it's tradition to eat turkey on Turkey Day. Hence the day called Turkey Day. But we aren't living in normal times anymore. If you think this is bad, can you imagine what Christmas is going to look like? I I can't even imagine. Anyhow, let's get into our closing monologue. So next time you're standing in line wondering why everything feels so hard, remember, it's not because you're failing, it's because the system is working exactly as it was built. Corporate grocery chains don't need you to thrive. They just need you to show up tired, swipe your card, and pretend this is normal. But the moment you start seeing the cracks, even quietly, even alone at 2 a.m., that's when their illusion starts to fall apart. Because once you understand the game, you can't unsee the joke. And trust me, the punchline isn't them laughing at us, it's us finally laughing back. Again, someone put this into the comment section about the good fight. And they said something to the effect of, okay, if you think that Americans are winning, take your sweet rear end to your local encampment and ask them at your local homeless encampment how the good fight is going against corporate America. And they'll tell you it's lost. There's no way that someone that's living in the gutter right now can tell you that, well, we tried because we never could try. There's no chance of any sort of uprising by the proletariat. Zero chance. Every time that they think that they're doing something, it's not working. What did we have the No Kings protests about a month ago? Where did that lead to? An animation of a bunch of people getting crapped on by a jet with Big Orange inside? Yeah, that's that's what he thinks of you. And that's what the United States of corporate America thinks of the rest of us. We're here to serve one master, and that's money. We're not here to become part of a wonderful society that takes care of its poor, takes care of its homeless, that feeds the hungry, and that houses the unhoused. We're not here to make certain that life is fair. Because I'll tell you this much, life is cruel, and it will continue to get more cruel as resources become more scarce, as more people fail at paying their rent and become the newly found outdoor people. That's when you know that stuff's going wrong. When ordinary people can no longer afford to be inside. And once you get outside, it's really hard to get back inside. And any person that's on the street right now will tell you life is nearly impossible out there. I don't know how or what forces keep those people going, but I think that there's just mental illness roaming the streets of America. Un, how do I put this? Unfiltered, uh, just wild. The feral American is going to start becoming your typical American because going feral is part of what this system really wants. It wants mental health out there unchecked, unhelped, and with no resources for those people. And that's soon where the proletariat is going to find itself.